Salut et bienvenue dans une nouvelle vidéo, je m'appelle Emma et j'espère que vous allez bien. Aujourd'hui, je voudrais vous présenter la façon avec laquelle j'ai appris le français cette fois-ci. Je la trouve un petit peu différente que les autres façons que j'ai déjà utilisées pour apprendre le chinois et le coréen. Et c'est parti! So if you've been around for a while, you probably know that when it comes to learning Chinese or Korean, I'm a huge advocate for using textbooks and more regular structured lessons. However, with French this time around, I discovered a method called learning languages through the nature method, which basically is a program that is developed to teach you language step by step in the target language through story form. The book for French was actually written in the 1950s, which means that it's pretty old now compared to a lot of newer programs that have been developed as of late. But old doesn't have to mean outdated. If this is the only approach I use to learning French without any other additional material like podcasts or other children's books or TV shows or whatnot, if I were back in the 1950s, how would I fare with this particular approach? My background in French is between the ages of 5 and 25, so 20 years. I've taken a total of 2 years of French, whether that be weekend classes or self-studying on my own. And the last time I properly sat down to study French was a solid 3 years ago, I would say. So anyways, I came into this method with some prior knowledge, some basics of French, and I'm not completely starting from scratch. So this course is divided into 50 chapters, with the first 20 following a French family called les Duclos. There's a mom and a dad and their 4 kids, and then their grandparents, and then their little neighborhood out in the countryside of France. And the storyline goes through, things that happen in the house, how the kids interact with other kids in the area, and play in the trees, in the lake, while the remaining 30 chapters follow an entirely different storyline of a family that lived in Africa and they moved to France. And besides the day-to-day interactions, it also touches on more complex subjects such as love, jealousy, vengeance, and also a little bit of history like the French Revolution, Joan of Arc, and also sightseeing Paris and the different landmarks of Paris from the 1950s. As you could imagine, the stories start out pretty short, and then they progressively get longer and longer, which comes with more vocabulary as well. It also naturally integrates simple grammar, so present tense followed by past tense, future tense, conditional tenses that are all incorporated into the storyline. After the passage, you usually have some exercises that you can do. The first one is always a fill-in-the-blank story summarizing type of exercise to review your vocabulary. After that, you will have some more reading comprehension questions, some grammar exercises, and then a bonus exercise depending on the level that you're at. Sometimes this can be in the form of crosswords, or sometimes they give you 6 to 8 different images and you have to write a storyline. When I first open a new chapter, I will play the audio as I'm looking at the words and I will shadow along with it.
Un jour et une nuit en 24 heures, 1 heure à 60 minutes, une demi-heure à 30 minutes.
The second time round though, I will turn off the audio and I will just reread aloud the entire passage.
L'école commence à 8 heures du matin. Le matin, les enfants sont à l'école de 8 heures à midi.
Afterwards, I move on to the exercises, the first being the fill-in-the-blank summarizing exercise. And although I could just fill in the blank into the book, I thought it would be a better idea to actually rewrite the whole summary out onto a separate piece of paper, and in that way, I can tackle my spelling and get a better active sense of the grammar conjugation. As for the grammar exercises, I know that there are people out there who choose not to do it at all and they just read the passage. I do complete the grammar exercises, but in a very chill way. Like I fill in the blank instead of copying it out, just to kind of get myself to recognize some patterns when it comes to verb conjugation. I found myself getting really immersed and invested in the plot, in the character development arc and all of that stuff. As you near the end of the book, Passages can get as long as 15 to 20 to 25 minutes. And oftentimes I'm so focused on the storyline that I completely forget that 20-25 minutes have gone by. And because it is not simply just a storybook, it is in fact a language learning approach that had been skillfully designed to introduce to you vocab, grammar bit by bit. I found that my grasp for grammar this time round is a lot better than the other times that I've learned French grammar. Or maybe grasp is not the right word, but my reflex when it comes to verb conjugation has improved a lot. So before I would only be comfortable conjugating present tense singular. I always had trouble with conjugating plural. But after this program, I found that it came a lot more natural to me to conjugate in plural. Before, I usually didn't conjugate in past or future tense as well. I kind of just stuck to present tense. Again, parts of it are coming more naturally. I've pronounced it, read it aloud so many times now that I've given my brain enough input for it to recognize patterns on its own to the point where it is able to apply those patterns to new verbs that I may have not encountered in this book itself. With the open-ended reading comprehension questions, sometimes I will respond to it orally, or sometimes I will write an answer for it. Obviously, the exercises that take up the most brain power would be the mega output exercises, or in this case, story writing, creative writing exercises. And at first it felt kind of like a burden because I have to use my brain the most, but it actually really grew on me eventually because as a young kid learning English, I had always been a big fan of creative writing exercises. So I guess in a way, this kind of sparked that part of me again. Because I did shadow the audio, I found that my pronunciation had also improved, as well as my liaison, which is when you legato and connect words together when you're speaking. Something else I struggled with before was differentiating masculine and feminine nouns and then conjugating the verbs and adjectives that came with it. This time round, with a lot of input and repetition, albeit just with this one book, my brain was able to pick up patterns to give an educated guess as to whether a noun is feminine or masculine. But then nearer to the end of the book, I also encountered a section that explained to me how certain word endings are associated with the gender of the word, like this. And that was a God-given piece of information for me because I struggled with that so hard before. Actually, they didn't even give it to me straight up. In this vocabulary exercise, they just gave me 15 to 20 sample sentences, and slowly my brain was able to recognize these patterns. And I was so elated when I found out that this was the case. Because before, when I was unsure of a gender of a word, I would just basically mumble my way through it. It's not really le, it's not really la, it's just something in the middle that could be heard as both. And then I would try to get away with it. But now I feel more confident in this area. As the storyline gets more difficult, the passages get longer and the vocab that's introduced gets to a higher level, I actually still found that I was able to understand not always the grammar, but 80 to 90% of the storyline. Vocab-wise, if you already have a basis in English, I find that advanced vocab, you can pretty much get away with making a guess at what it is because the spelling is pretty similar, if not the same with the English counterpart for the most part. So in that sense, I don't always feel like I'm learning new vocab per se, but more so familiarizing myself with the French version of certain English words. Some potential drawbacks of this book, this method, is one, there is no answer key. Unless you have a different person, a tutor, an app that is willing to mark your answers to the different grammar exercises, you're basically on your own. And maybe you're diligent enough to catch yourself as you go back through it, maybe not. That's one thing I wish that they had included, which is an answer key. Illustration-wise, there are only black and white, simple illustrations, which to me did not pose an issue at all. I actually found it quite refreshing and calming to have a break from all the vibrant colors that you find in books nowadays. I could imagine that it might not be as engaging for people who have a harder time focusing on things that don't look as exciting at face value. This book supposedly introduces grammar up to a B2 level. While I do understand the plot, the storyline for the most part, I don't always understand why a certain grammar is used, but I can deduce from the grammar what it is supposed to mean. Part of me feels like they move through the grammar points pretty quickly, but if I can still understand the story, does it really matter? I personally still find the higher level grammar kind of difficult to implement. Funnily enough, with higher level vocab, I usually don't have any issues with that because of its similarity to English. However, with the more basic, like A1, A2 level vocab, a lot of those words are strictly available in the French language, and you can't use your prior knowledge of English to deduce them. And I feel like the vocab that is introduced in the lower levels are quite niche. Even though the program progresses into more B1, B2 territory vocab, it doesn't mean that you know all the A1, A2 vocab. When I reached chapter 45, my YouTube actually suggested a self-help video in French for a French-speaking audience. And me being my curious self, I was like, yeah, why not? Let's click onto it and see how much I can understand. If I don't, that's not a big deal. I'm still learning. And I found that I was able to comprehend a lot of the video, even on the first watch.
Et ta vie est précieuse, et t'as de l'importance, et t'es précieux toi-même. Rien que le fait de prendre la décision de partir de l'état où tu te détestais, où tu te rejetais, à un état où tu t'aimes, où tu décides de construire une relation avec toi-même, une relation d'alliance, d'amitié, d'amour.
And it blew my mind that through this method alone, because I was basically consuming 0 extra things on the side, I had reached a level where I could comprehend the speed of native speakers, albeit people who are speaking to a camera in a video. So obviously they're going to project more, they're going to enunciate better. They're by themselves, it's not a conversation with someone else. So it's still a lower level compared to how French actually works in real life, right? Because again, the issue with me beforehand was that I felt like the material that I was consuming in my target language or languages had always been quite simple in terms of depth of thought. Personally, I'm quite interested in self-development and philosophy and people sharing about their life stories and whatnot. So when my target language is not yet at a higher level, I feel like I'm stuck with the subjects that I may not be entirely too interested about. But because I am now able to consume like self-development or more philosophical content in French, I can kind of see the horizon open up and for me to continue learning French in this natural way through content that actually really interests me. If you complete these 50 chapters, what do? For French, English, and Italian, there's a sequel book that is the initiation into blank literature. So what I'm going to read next is going to be Initiation à la littérature française. I'll probably watch YouTube videos on topics that I really enjoy as well because I can do that now. Isn't that exciting? There's also a resource I really enjoy and it's called Un jour en actu. And it is actually a resource geared towards French-speaking kids. Kids send in questions and then they make a video with animation to explain that to like a 5-year-old or to a 10-year-old. So simpler language.
Un jour, une question. Pourquoi on décore un sapin à Noël? Boules, guirlandes, lumière. En décembre, les sapins sont parés de couleurs en attendant Noël. C'est vrai en France et dans plein d'autres endroits du monde.
I think I might also start trying to read some French novels. Peut-être je lirai Le Petit Prince parce que j'ai déjà lu ce livre en coréen. J'ai déjà compris une partie de l'histoire. But yeah, overall, oftentimes I forget that I'm actually learning French because I get so wrapped up in the storyline. Because I do have some basics in French, this is not a testament that you can get to like a level where you can understand native content from scratch. I can't vouch for that. If I really wanted to do so, I probably would try to learn the Italian program instead, right? Because I have no basics in Italian, but I suppose that my French and my English will probably aid in that as well. The different versions of this method, so in the different languages, aren't just basically translated versions of each other. I think they're actually written specific to the culture in mind. For example, with the French version, we have the Duclos family. There are a lot of French concepts, French names, landmarks, you name it. Whereas with English, you have the Smiths. With Italian, you have the Rossi. With German, you have the Müller. Müller. I'm sorry if I butchered that. So all in all, I'm very, very happy with this method, and it comes to show that old doesn't mean outdated. I was talking to my friends recently, and we came to the conclusion that perhaps if you only have to learn language for a hobby, not for school, not for work, then you can take your time. Maybe a less structured approach means that you progress more slowly. As long as you can find activities that you genuinely enjoy in those target languages, you will naturally acquire it, and having the language will be just like a neat after effect. Anyways, that is all for this video. I hope you were able to take away something useful. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Encore une fois, merci à tous. You guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!